Hi everybody, welcome to another WeatherCast America QuickCast. And first we're going to look at the current weather in the US as well as the current severe weather outlook. And then I want to dive a little deeper into the East Coast heat wave, and that'll build back into the central parts of the US. As well as we'll take a look at tropical troubles, possibly for the Florida East Coast into the Carolinas, and also keeping an eye on further development in South Texas as the week continues. So let's get right into it. So here's a current look at the weather here in the US. We do have a severe thunderstorm watch here that covers much of upstate New York, Massachusetts, including the Boston metro area, much of Maine, and then pretty much all of New Hampshire and Vermont. We're watching for scattered showers and thunderstorms. Some of those could be severe with damaging winds and large hail as the primary threats. We've already seen some of those larger hail reports here, looks like into Vermont this afternoon. We're also keeping an eye on the Great Lakes, especially northwest Pennsylvania, and then back into the lower peninsula of Michigan around Detroit and Lansing for some isolated to scattered severe storms there. Similar to the storms in the Northeast, primary threats are damaging wind and large hail. Further west, we have a large area of marginal risk that stretches all the way back into the Four Corners and then up into southwest Minnesota. We also have an area of slight risk that has our best potential for all hazards, including a low-end tornado threat. Last I checked, it was about a 2% tornado threat, but still not a zero chance. We can also see the moisture remnants here of Alberto, and some of that is creeping into the southwest and the Four Corners. So we'll take a look at that on the model depictions, but that is going to enhance some of that activity, especially here in western Colorado, northern Arizona, and also northern New Mexico later this afternoon. So taking a look at the model depiction for today, this is the GFS model from earlier this afternoon. We can see the remnants of Alberto continuing to cause flash flood situations in northern Mexico, as well as heavy rain and thunderstorms still funneling through South Texas later this afternoon. We still have a lot of tropical moisture, and the flow around the high pressure on the East Coast continues to funnel kind of west-northwestward that moisture across the Texas Gulf Coast, as well as a little bit of enhanced moisture flow even along other parts of the Gulf Coast, including Florida. We can also see our other invest area. As of earlier this morning, the National Hurricane Center upped this to a 40% chance of development over the next couple days. The later afternoon here, as I put this model depiction into motion, we can see that the shower and storm activity picks up here in especially the areas that I mentioned earlier, the Four Corners, and then into Nebraska and South Dakota. Still have that ongoing chance of storms along the East Coast and Northeast today. But we can definitely see that surge of moisture enhancement there from Alberto. Almost a monsoonal type flow into the Four Corners will increase there. A big chance of, like yesterday, flash flooding with heavy rains, a lot of lightning, and also large hail's potential there. Going into tomorrow afternoon, there's not a ton of time for development on this invest in the Atlantic. But going into tomorrow afternoon, we do see what the GFS shows, kind of a weak area of low pressure, but still the GFS shows at least some enhancement here and some structure to this system. And then also heavy rain spiraling out of that across Georgia and the coastal regions of the Carolinas tomorrow afternoon. So we're running out of time to see development, but the GFS has a somewhat organized system, although it doesn't look particularly strong. So here's your GFS model at 18Z tomorrow. And then taking a look at your Euro model, similar placement, but the Euro model, let me clear off some of the graphics here. The Euro model, you can see, does not have as much development. It shows a more broad and a lot less organized area of shower and thunderstorm activity from, again, northern Florida all the way through coastal areas of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, with the heaviest precip around that area of low pressure and where it interacts with the coastline, particularly far southern Georgia and northern Florida around Jacksonville. Both models now are fairly consistent at putting the landfall here in northern Florida or southern Georgia tomorrow afternoon. So we see that again here on the GFS for 18Z tomorrow, and here's your Euro model for 18Z. Once again, the placement of these is pretty similar, with the GFS maybe being slightly ahead, having the storm come on shore before 18Z, while the Euro seems to lag behind, possibly having the storm come on shore tomorrow afternoon around 18Z. So either way, timing is a little bit off between the two models, but they both have fairly low-end systems. It's remained to be even seen if we get any more development than we currently have. Right now, essentially an invest area or a tropical wave. If we get anything to develop, it could be a tropical depression by landfall tomorrow, or even a low-end tropical storm, although I think we're running out of time for development. Taking a look further out this weekend, we have to continue to watch that Central American gyre. The Central American gyre that's set up over the Yucatan Peninsula, the models, both the GFS and the Euro, have something else developing in the Gulf of Mexico, a very similar location to where Alberto just developed, and both models are pretty consistent at developing this over the weekend, by Sunday afternoon having a low pressure off the northern Mexico coastline. It again remains to be seen if how organized this is developed, whether it's a depression or a tropical storm. A hurricane seems unlikely, but it could be a similar to Alberto, a lower end tropical storm. And either way, regardless of a name, that's going to put more flash flooding into northern Mexico and also coastal and southern Texas. We can see here what it looks like on the GFS at 18Z on Sunday. And then here's the Euro model depiction, 18Z on Sunday. Again, very similar models have the placement still off the northern Mexican coastline. They also, I think, do a good job at showing the blocking ridge of high pressure really established over the western Atlantic and the East Coast. That's going to push anything that does develop westward into Mexico. Taking a look at one of the high-res models, this is the 3-kilometer NAM. We can see again that surge of moisture, the remnants of Alberto here in northern Mexico and in southern Texas, even southwest Texas. We can also see there's still some bands of some shower and thunderstorm activity pushing ashore with that flow off the Gulf of Mexico. Still some scattered showers and thunderstorms possible here through Texas. Again, lower severe risk than we had yesterday when the Alberto was coming ashore, but some of these stronger showers and storms could produce some gusty winds in coastal areas of Texas. We can also see that enhancement here into the four corners, and as I put the 3-kilometer NAM into motion, we'll definitely see that enhancement here with some of that moisture from Alberto meeting up here with the elevation changes of the southern Rockies and enhancing some of that shower and thunderstorm activity, especially southwest Colorado, northwest New Mexico, and northern Arizona, and even a little bit into southeast Utah. We can also see through the 3-kilometer NAM those showers and thunderstorm activities continuing here on the East Coast, and then some big storms with maybe a MCS cluster developing in western Nebraska later tonight. Also some larger hailstorms developing here in Nebraska and South Dakota. Again, all hazards are possible in this area, with the primary threats being damaging wind and large hail, and it looks like the NAM is showing that. Putting the model into motion again, we can see that continues through the night and also into tomorrow, with more rounds of showers and storms affecting Minnesota, an area that does not need to see more rain. And then by Friday afternoon, we see another big push of moisture with more storms developing here over Colorado, western Nebraska, and also Wyoming, as well as more storms here in the Dakotas through Wisconsin tomorrow afternoon. The NAM isn't really picking up on that invest area, but we can see a little hint of that with some shower and thunderstorm activity here in the southeast, although that low pressure will likely create more enhanced shower and storm activity than what the NAM model is showing. Continuing to put the model into motion, we can see that trough that digs through the plains by Sunday will be into the Great Lakes, and that could create another risk of some severe weather all the way back into eastern Kansas, but especially in Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, and then into Michigan. So here's a look at the temperatures. This is from the National Weather Service maximum temperature forecast, and we can see here it is going to be hot today once again in the Northeast, with mid to upper 90s reaching Hartford, Boston, and even up into the coastal areas of Maine. We can also see mid to upper 90s in the Ohio Valley from Pittsburgh, Columbus, down through Cincinnati, and then certainly this time of year, not a rare chance to see mid to upper 90s around the Arklatex, but it's a hot one, especially for areas that haven't seen a lot of heat yet this summer here in the Northeast and the Great Lakes. We're going to watch as I put this into motion that heat shift back to the south and west. We'll see by next week that really increases temperatures here in the southern and central plains. And you can see here by day 7, we have a big increase in temperatures here in the central and southern plains, possibly over 100 for areas around Oklahoma City, Dallas, Fort Worth, close to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and up into southern Kansas. Garden City and Topeka may hit close to 100 degrees. And then still not cool across the East Coast. Upper 90s, areas around Macon, Georgia, Columbia, South Carolina, Charlotte, Raleigh, Richmond, and even into Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, still could be in the upper 90s by middle of next week. So the heat, if you like the heat, if you like the summer temperatures, then this is your kind of weather. The only relief here by next week could be in the northern tier, where it's going to remain stormy, and we're going to see those troughs continue to dig through, causing rounds of shower and thunderstorm activity. The areas here around the upper Great Lakes, upper Midwest, mostly in the upper 70s to low 80s. So that's your only really consistently cool location in the US for the next 7 to 10 days. And then we do also see a little bit of cool down in the Northeast, in especially Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and upstate New York. But once you get down even into the southern parts of New England, it's going to be 90s still. It looks like in the forecast for Hartford, New York, Scranton, and even State College, Pennsylvania. And then certainly we're used to that kind of weather down here in the Gulf Coast, but remaining humid, hot in places like Jackson, Starkville, Hale State, and then also places like Montgomery, Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, as well as down into Central Florida, Tampa, and Orlando. Certainly also this time of year, the Southwest remains hot, with possibly 1 teens here, Vegas, and into areas around Phoenix. We can also take a look at the jet stream, and that gives us some indications here. We can see that jet streak that is going to spur some of those stronger storms here in western Nebraska, Wyoming, and the Dakotas later this afternoon. And we can also see that well-established area of high pressure that's really funneling any of that moisture and storm activity up and around that high pressure. So that's why the Front Range and the Four Corners remain stormy, and also the northern tier, the upper Midwest into the Northeast, stays a little stormy. As we go into the weekend, we can see that dip in the jet stream. That's going to create those shower and storm activities here in the Great Lakes, as well as into the Ohio Valley and even back towards the Missouri Valley around Kansas City. But otherwise, it remains a pretty flat jet stream over the weekend, with most of that activity across the very northern tier and also Canada. Going into next weekend, we have a slightly different pattern setting up. We still have that high pressure dominating the central and eastern US, but you can see here it's not quite of a flat jet stream. We have a large ridge in the central and eastern US, and we have a pretty good dip in the jet stream here in the Pacific Northwest and also here in the Northeast. So that really sets up a pattern that's a little more conducive of severe weather, especially back here in the plains by next weekend. It's a little too far out to get details, but going forward into early July, it looks like this pattern of low pressure and high pressure parade across the US may pick up. If that does verify, that would increase the chances of some larger severe weather chances, especially again central and northern parts of the US, and then following those into the Ohio Valley and East Coast. We can also see that pattern set up in the height anomalies. We see our big, deep high pressure here along the East Coast. And then we'll watch that as I put this into motion. We'll watch that high pressure shift back to the south and west and really create that ridge in the central part of the US by next weekend. Here's that little dip that digs through the weekend and create those storm opportunities for parts of the Missouri Valley, Ohio Valley, and into the Great Lakes. And then once again, going into next weekend, we see the trough here in the west and Pacific Northwest. And then we also see that trough and dip here in the East Coast. and a big ridge of high pressure established over the central US. So that's going to keep things cooking, especially here, Texas, up into the mid-Mississippi River Valley, and also into the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes. Really through the next 7 to 10 days, it's going to be a very hot stretch here. So again, watching a few areas here of tropical troubles, South Texas and also Florida and the Carolinas here this weekend, and then really watching that heat for parts of the Northeast, East Coast, into the Central Plains and Great Lakes going into next week, and really continuing all the way through at least next weekend, with really the next larger shot of cooler weather not till next weekend for parts in the northern tier. And again, then we'll have to watch out for any severe weather opportunities here in the central and northern parts of the US. So stay safe, stay weather aware, and we'll definitely continue to have severe weather coverage as well as tropical coverage here on WeatherCast America. Here's your boat, beach, and barbecue grades for June 22nd and 23rd, 2024.